Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and listening to my podcast. This is Dumb Old Dad, and this is my second episode of Dumb Old Dad. And in this episode, I thought I would tell you a funny story about something that happened to me, and of course, Dumb Old Dad, what he did about it. This is a story of how I got a speeding ticket for driving 2 miles an hour. I used to work for a company that did computer repair. And I had a company that was probably about an hour away from where I lived or where I worked. And so I had to travel about an hour to go and work on computers for this company. Well, this particular day, it was in the winter, and I was about halfway there, and there was a huge blizzard going on. And so I was driving on the freeway and trying to get to this company so I could do the computer work for them. Well, the freeway split, and one part of the freeway went to Salt Lake City, and the other part of the freeway went to Pocatello. Well, as soon as I got to the off ramp to go to the Salt Lake freeway, the road was closed. They had put up barricades across the road, and so I couldn't turn and head towards the company that I was supposed to do the computer work for. So I was forced, there was no warning, so I was forced to go straight to, and I was on my way to Pocatello. Well, I didn't want to go to Pocatello, and I didn't want to drive clear to the next exit. So I watched for, there's a little crossover that goes from one freeway to the other freeway. And I watched for that little crossover. And on the crossover, it says, for emergency vehicles only. So I slowed down. I figured, this is a blizzard. It's an emergency. I need to take this emergency crossover. So I slowed down. I crept over just a few miles an hour across this little dirt road between the freeways, and then got on the other freeway going the opposite direction so I could go back. Well, before I even got, maybe up to 10 miles an hour, there was a police officer waving me down. He was standing in the middle of the freeway and was motioning that I should go to the side. So I pulled over to the side, and there was another car pulled over there too. So I slowly pulled over to the side, and he walked up to my window. I rolled down my window. It's freezing cold out, and it's a blizzard. And the police officer looked at me, and he said, "Did you just take the emergency crossover?" And in my mind, I was thinking, I wonder why he's asking me. And in my mind, I was thinking, am I going to incriminate myself? And so I said, well, in my mind, I thought I should ask him, did you see me take the emergency crossover? But, being a good citizen that I am, I said, yes, I took the emergency crossover. It's a blizzard and the road was closed, and so I took the emergency crossover. And he says, well, that's against the law. I'm going to give you a ticket. And I said, well, why, when is it okay to take the emergency crossover? And he said, never. You are not an emergency vehicle. You should never take that crossover. I'm like, so then what do I do? He says, well, you'd have to go down to the next exit, get off, and come back around. I said, so there is no way that in any emergency, can I take that? He said, no. So I sat in my car and waited for him to give me a ticket, and he pulled over a couple other cars, and they parked in front of me on the freeway. Anyway, he came back, and he gave me the ticket, and I went on my way. Well, after everything was done and I got back home, I got out this ticket to take a look and see what it was, and it was a misdemeanor. I had been ticketed for a misdemeanor, not just a violation, but a misdemeanor. Well, I work for a computer company, and so the things that I do are critical that people trust me what I'm doing. And I, work in banks, and I work in big businesses. I work in all sorts of healthcare industry, and doctors' offices, accountants' offices, and lawyers' offices. And so I'm just like, I can't have a misdemeanor on my record. So I went back to my house, and I decided I'm going to talk to some lawyer friends of mine and see what I should do. So I take the next day or so, I can't remember, I went into one of my friends that is an attorney, and I said, all right, this is what happened to me. What do about it? And he said, well, did you take the emergency crossover? I'm like, yeah, I did. He says, well, there's two things that can happen. The first thing that can happen is you could go before the judge and you could tell him the whole story and say, yeah, it was a blizzard and I needed to turn around. I needed to be at this other business. And he could just say, okay, I get it. It was, it was an emergency. You took the crossover, no big deal, and we'll just waive the ticket. Or he could, listen to your explanation and then say, did you take the emergency crossover? And of course, you'd have to say yes, and he would say guilty and slam down the hammer on you. And then you would have a misdemeanor on your record. I said, well, I don't want to take a chance that I get a good or a bad judge. What do I do? He said, well, there is one other option. Let me see what I can do. I think what I'll do is this is my attorney. He says, I will talk to the prosecuting attorney and see if maybe he can reduce the misdemeanor to maybe a moving violation. Because, you're not out there doing this all the time. You don't have a record. You don't even have speeding tickets. So he said, let me see what I can do. He said, would you be willing to do like a speeding ticket or some type of moving violation? I'm like, absolutely. If you can reduce it, less than a misdemeanor, that would be perfect. So a couple of days later, he calls me back and he says, well, I was able to get your ticket, your misdemeanor ticket, reduced to a moving violation. Okay, moving violation, what is it? He said, I had it reduced to a speeding ticket. And I just laughed and I'm like, I'll take it. I will easily take a speeding ticket over a misdemeanor. And so that is how I got a speeding ticket for driving 2 miles an hour. Can you believe that? A speeding ticket for driving 2 miles an hour. And I, with a big, huge smile on my face, went down to the courthouse and paid my speeding ticket fine. So there is my story for today, how I got a speeding ticket for driving 2 miles an hour. Thanks for listening to my podcast. If you'd like to see my YouTube videos, please subscribe to my channel. It's Dumb Old Dad on YouTube. Or you can subscribe to my podcast and I'll give you more great little episodes of what dumb old dads do. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.